Okay, we are now streaming live on YouTube.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Charlie Carlson. I'm the chairman of the so-called Nauset Estuary Stakeholder Group. And this group is a assemblage of representatives from Eastham and Orleans that is working on the dredging of Nauset Estuary. And in particular, we're gathered tonight to focus primarily on the environmental notification form that has been prepared for the project. Before we get to that, there are just a housekeeping matter we should get out of the way. We actually last met on September 22nd of 2020. Much water has passed under the bridge since then. But I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes of that meeting, which I circulated to all of you.
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin Gallagher, and I'll move approval of those minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands.
I can just give you an eye.
I think we more than sufficed. Okay, well, thank you for that. So we're going to, as I said, focus tonight on the what is referred to as the expanded environmental notification form for this project that's been prepared by Woods Hole Group. And it's available online at the Eastham website and will be posted momentarily, I think, on the Orleans website if it has not already been posted today. It is a lengthy document of over 600 pages, so not to be read in just an hour or so. But it is a very comprehensive description of the project as planned, as proposed, and describes not only how the project would be done, but what its environmental impacts are expected to be, what methodologies will be used for the dredging, how the dredged material will be disposed of, etc. So there's a great deal of information to be taken in. Before today's meeting, some members of this group submitted comments on the EENF to Leslie Fields of Woods Hole Group, who is here today with us and is prepared to talk about the EENF in some length. And I'm going to turn this discussion over to Leslie so that she can integrate some of the comments that have been received and provide responses on those comments. And once she's done that, we'll certainly be open for discussion of other comments that haven't been submitted yet in writing. So Leslie, please take it away.
All right, thanks very much, Charlie. I've got some slides here to share. So as Charlie said, I have received some comments, staff comments from the town of Eastham. I think that's probably Shana's comments, and then Shana had some additional comments that came in as a separate document. We got some good comments from Harry Swift, who's on the NESG and at this meeting tonight. A compilation of comments from 16 residents in the town of Eastham, all pretty much in opposition to the project. From Orleans, we've gotten comments from Charlie as chairman of the NESG, but I haven't got any other comments. So I'm going to just say that, I can take comments tonight and write them down. It would be helpful to me if I could also get them in writing, if you have those and want to submit some additional comments, and that I would take those, through the 7th of June. So I didn't really know how to approach this meeting. So I don't have a presentation prepared that describes the project because I'm assuming you've all read it. I can pull up slides and pictures and things like that if we need some visuals to talk from. But what I did instead was I took the comments I do have and I grouped them, according to category or theme. And I thought it might be helpful for me to just go through and address some of those comments. Charlie and I talked about it beforehand and thought this would be, a relatively good way to go for the meeting. So that's what we plan to do. And I'm just going to say, feel free to stop me or ask a question really as we go, because what I really want to do is hear from you and try to address your comments. So, just feel free to ask questions. Jamie, are you raising your hand?
Just a quick question. So I actually received an email from an Orleans resident that had concerns about the project. Should I pass that along to you as well, or?
I would say, yeah, I think all the comments probably could come to me and to Charlie as chairman of the NESG.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I'll get your email from Shana and make sure that they end up where they're supposed to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is sort of a summary of 14 different areas where there were questions. And I hopefully for those of you who did submit questions, you'll see your questions in here and I'll address them as we go along, but certainly if there's anything I've left out or amended, please bring it to my attention. So I have a slide like this for each comment. It's kind of no real visuals or graphics or anything. So it's going to be kind of dry, but let's just go through it. So in terms of sediments, one of the comments was that the sediments dredged in the Town Cove area that are planned for mechanical dredging with offloading to trucks at Goose Hummock, where's that material going to go in the upland? So we've identified 3 different sites that are permitted in South Dennis that could take this material. And we also have acknowledged the fact that the towns of Orleans and Eastham could take this material if they have sites that are permitted to take this kind of material. It's mostly sandy, it's clean, it's about 9,660 cubic yards. The reason we are mechanically dredging it and taking it to Town Cove is because it's really not feasible to pump it to any sort of beaches or any other beneficial reuse sites over on the barrier or down near Nauset Beach because of the distance. The material does have some higher concentrations of red tide cyst, so it can't go directly to a beach. It needs to go to some sort of upland holding facility where it dries out and then it can be reused. But we do have, as I said, 3 permitted sites in South Dennis that could take the material right now. Another comment was that the sediments from Priscilla and Mill Pond channels that are proposed for dune enhancement north of Nauset Public Beach are not compatible with the existing dunes because they have greater than 10% fines. So I just wanted to point out that those fines in the Priscilla channel are in the upper 1/2 foot to 1.5 feet. They do have more than 10% fines. The lower 1 to 4 feet of sand that's proposed for dredging is all sand. It meets the criteria for being having less than 10% fines. So when you homogenize it all, we're right at the 10% boundary. And so we felt it was still appropriate to go ahead and propose that material would be used in the dune where naturally finer grain materials are located. And that material is going to be used for adding resiliency to the dune by adding volume to the dune. One thing I wanted to point out though is that we have not yet sampled the material in the Mill Pond channel. So that's coming up in the next month or so. If we find that Mill Pond channel material is almost entirely made up of material greater than 10% fines, then we're going to have to readjust and find either some other place to put that mill pond material or change the dredge channel design a bit to eliminate some of those finer grained areas.
Leslie, this is Charlie. Is it accurate to say that the mixing of the finer material with the clean sand from Priscilla will then be capped by the reuse of material that's been excavated from the dewatering area? And so what will be left on top of the new resiliency dune, I'll call it, will be a significant thickness of reused existing sand?
Yeah, that's correct. So we're gonna, when we build that dewatering basin, we're gonna have about, I think, 12,000 cubic yards excess material. And then another 10,000 that we're gonna take and spread back over the material, the dredge material. So there will be, you know, a foot or more of material on top of this dredge material to, and that will be the native dune sand from the dune right now, that's there right now.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Leslie, quick question. This is material dredged from East Ham behind the barrier. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
No, it's Priscilla and Mill Pond. So this is all
Okay.
in Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just clarifying. Thank you.
Yep.
Can I
All
just
right,
ask a follow-up question to the first answer that you had provided?
Yes.
So the permitted sites in South Dennis, is that permitted to hold the material temporarily, or are they ready to accept sand that we sell to them, or how do those sites work?
So good question. So we simply have to list those sites in our permit application as places where this material could go. They're already permitted as materials rehandling, dredge material placement sites. The details about cost and you know, whether or not, you know, if we're going to have to pay to deposit the material there, or maybe pay if the towns want to buy it back, that has to be worked out yet. So all the details about financing of that have not been worked out, but we do know that they're available. We've talked to the owners of those facilities. We know those sites are permitted and that they can take this material. So we just simply have to list it in our permit application.
Leslie, I had raised a question regarding the truck traffic and transportation safety. And have you addressed that in another location?
It's down a couple slides down lower, Harry.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. I tried to group them according to what made sense. So that's under sort of construction activities. Okay. All right, channel design. So there was a question or a comment that the 100-foot wide channel behind the barrier beach is not needed for safety and will have negative impacts on stability of the barrier beach and will increase the area of impact. So in the expanded EENF, we have a section, I think it's in the project description, it's entitled Project Need. And in there, we define all the reasons why this project is needed. And one of those was based on feedback that we got from emergency responders in both towns, fire chiefs included, where they indicated that there's a need to provide a safe and navigable channel in Nauset Estuary. So, you know, I know there's been a lot of comments about, is this project really needed for public safety? We were going off what we heard from the fishermen, residential boaters in the area, and for the emergency first responders and fire chiefs, saying that it is needed for public safety.
And if I could add, public safety is clearly not the only driver for need. I won't get us sidetracked on that long discussion, but there are many other elements of need here as well.
That's a good point, Charlie. I have a slide on that later on, just on, what the other drivers for the project are. So,
Leslie, relative to safety and the drive on that, how many incidents have you identified in that channel during the last 5 years?
We haven't done that research, Harry. So,
Harry, I can interrupt Harry and just tell you that I'm aware, as is Nate Sears, of two examples within the last couple of years of the town's boats trying to get out to the inlet to deal with people in distress out at the inlet, and they could not get through because of a low tide at that point in time. And so the responders had to come from other harbors like Chatham in order to deal with the situation. In one of those situations, an individual died because they could not be reached. And I don't remember the situation with the other case, but it was also a very serious situation. This is not a small matter.
No, it isn't, Charlie. And that's one of the reasons that Eastham has a boat that can be launched from Coast Guard Beach in order to reach the inlet from the other side. And Eastham has responded to that issue. So I think that this is a matter that needs to be addressed very specifically and not blown out of proportion as a major driver for this project, as being a major safety issue, saying someone died, therefore we have to dredge the channel and make it very wide.
Yeah, it's a very different situation. If I could interrupt here, it's actually not just the issue of safety for people who are just at the inlet or outside the inlet who can't be reached because of low tides. You have a number of other public safety problems, including the fact that if you were a recreational boater running a power boat and you were not familiar with those channels, you would likely run aground with some frequency. And the problem with that is that people are moving through the channel at different times, at different speeds, and hitting a shoal at any speed can be traumatic, meaning somebody gets ejected from a boat. And the risk of that occurrence when you have the number of boaters there on a day-to-day basis during the summer months is increasing dramatically with this shoaling problem. So it is not simply a surf rescue boat coming from the Coast Guard Beach to deal with the problem. We're talking about inside the marsh where you have recreational boaters having a safety problem. You also, as Leslie has talked about, have a safety problem with commercial boats being moored out at the inlet with the risk of a fuel spill or some other damage occurring because a boat breaks loose from a mooring. I mean, I could go on with some length about the public safety issues that relate to the need for dredging in an overall sense. I won't try and take the entire meeting for that purpose, but I think the point is quite clear that there are a lot of public safety issues here.
Right, Charlie. And I think it's also quite clear that the current shoaling situation has a limitation to the speed at which people navigate that channel. And therefore, there's a self-limitation associated with it that if you dredge it and make it wider, people will be going faster.
I think
and
you make
there are ways to mitigate this that are different than dredging it. And so I think that there are different opinions here, and I don't think it is safe to say, or appropriate to say that the only way to solve this is through dredging, which is exactly what you have been consistently saying. And I don't think that that is appropriate.
we may continue to disagree here, but in order to keep us moving, I'll forbear from responding further.
We've got two people with hands up, Charlie.
I'm sorry, I'm looking into a sunlight and
Okay, Jamie and Nate. Jamie's had her hand up for a while.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm looking into sunlight and I can't even see who's got a hand up. I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Okay, great. So I have one point, but before that, I was just going to quickly address the, the idea of, I'm well aware of how many recreational people are out in the cove in the summertime. The fact is, some of them can't swim. Some of them don't know how to use a boat. Some of them don't know how to use a paddleboard. Some of them are out there water skiing. You can't put them all in a bubble. They're going to hit a shoal. They're going to fall off their paddleboard because of a wake. These situations happen. I don't know if manipulating an environment is the answer, but they're going to happen. And whether it's dredged and the floor changes in a year, it's still going to happen. But that wasn't my point. I was kind of going back to the idea of town emergency responders, advocating for this. And maybe I'm wrong, but I was born out here, grew up out here. And I can't remember for the life of me, towns being responsible for surf rescue. I understand that our town has a surf rescue boat that they do use, but growing up, when you went out in the ocean or when you went out in a boat, that was on you. When you hiked the Grand Canyon, there's no guardrails up. And historically, I remember that was never there. So sometimes it feels as if we're creating something or creating a service to justify these actions when it's a service that I don't really remember ever existing. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it did exist and I don't remember. Maybe I wasn't around, but I don't remember any of these things ever existing.
I think Nate can talk about the history of, at least in Orleans, having some responsibility for this.
I'd love to hear from Nate because I do agree, but.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I can tell you right now, as the harbor master in Orleans and working with EENF, Nauset Estuary is the most dangerous estuary on the backside of Cape Cod. And the issue, majority of our calls are when someone goes out on a paddleboard or a kayak and their family's calling us saying they haven't returned. The tide's pushing against them, the wind's pushing against them. And my answer would be, if it was at low tide, we can't go out there and look for them. Or if we do, we're going to end up stuck as well. And a lot of times this is in the dark. When you talk about surf rescue, we plucked, even in the 5 years that I've been the harbor master, numerous boats out of the outside of that inlet that have been disabled, rescued numerous folks, towed them in through the inlet. I understand that we're not proposing to dredge the inlet, but you have to understand it's the window of time that is reduced that we can react to comfortably with confidence because of the limitations on the inside. Meaning there's a window of time where we can get through the inlet, and then there's a window of time that's going to close us from being able to get home, even if we get in the inlet. And that is impactful in terms of what we feel comfortable. And we will go if we can get out there. But there's been times, probably a half dozen times, where I've had to run all the way south to the 07 cut to get home after going out of Nauset Estuary to pluck somebody or check on somebody that was in trouble. And I can tell you, town of Orleans is also bought and we own, and we've been training with a Zodiac for like the last 5 years with open ocean launching. That's only out of necessity. And the reality is that's a limited asset, meaning there's only certain days where you would feel comfortable launching that off of one of these beaches with staff. It's not like you're going to launch it with 6 footers in shore break. It would put the staff in too much. It's just a safety issue. So I mean, there's days when we can use that small boat to access the outer beach and get offshore. but the limitations in that are, let's just say it's not a proper safety vessel. It's not outfitted properly to bring somebody in and bring somebody in safely. We can do it, but it's, you know, it's basically the only reason that we've ended up in that situation is because of these inlets and the tidal limitations that have been brought forward through the shoaling.
Charlie, Kevin has his hand up.
Okay, I'm seeing you in stack mode, so
All right. Well, I'll just go ahead, Charlie. If you'd allow me to add a 2 cents here, thank you. One of the older people on this call, I'm a little concerned about the comments about, are we creating a new public service by looking after vessels out on the water? And I would just say, we have a rich history, decades and years of life-saving stations. The reason we have lighthouses, I think we all work together, whether it be harbor master, local together, Coast Guard, Park Service. We have an obligation and we already have done it. We do it the best we can. I go all the way back to the comment that was raised by Harry on this point that was clearly to Leslie, just to say, could you please document more the safety incidents that have occurred out here in the last 5 years? I think that's more than appropriate. I think we're all trying to contribute to the draft expanded environmental notification form. Leslie, I think that's the data point that you heard the stakeholder group want to add some comments to build up and reinforce, but I would like to follow up separately with you just to document that rich history we have of life-saving stations and the care that we provide for our economy and for all that come by our waterways. It's really part of our culture.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, Charlie, to quickly respond. Kevin, I wasn't saying that we don't do that. I just didn't remember that being a tactic that had been used in the past. I mean, we have the Coast Guard. We have other towns. We all work together when there's a situation that's an emergency. If someone's in Eastham water and they're accessible off Coast Guard Beach, you know, and another town, you know, say someone's in another town, but, you know, Eastham can reach them first. Eastham goes. It's not like we're only helping people in Eastham, or we're only helping people in Dennis, or we're only helping people. You know, I think all towns have worked collaboratively together. And I think that's an important piece of the water rescue. And I know the other towns have also worked really closely with the Coast Guard. I mean, that's why they're here. I just want to make sure that we're being responsible about the approach. You know, we don't exist in a bubble.
Leslie, Mark, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Nate has his hand up again.
Oh, fine. Unfortunately, I can't see all because of you've got this slide up on the screen. I can't see all the other people who may have their hands up. I don't know how to eliminate.
If you use that grid function up at the top and then expand it, you can see everybody, Charlie. Or I can just help you.
I think you may have to help me.
Okay. Well, Nate has his hands up. Nate, you still want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, we've had incidents. The catalyst for Orleans purchasing a surf rescue boat was the fact that we had 2 paddle boarders out on the outer beach a few years back. Offshore winds picked up, blew them a mile off the beach offshore. Wind continued to pick up. Bystanders, Good Samaritans, went out to rescue them on additional paddle boards. And the next thing you know, we had 5 people on paddle boards that were 3/4 of a mile off the beach. And the only thing that they could hold on to was the shark detection buoy. And this is in July. And we waited 2 hours for Chatham Harbor Master to get there. The other piece to this is that as far as the Coast Guard's concerned, and the reason that those high flyers are in the channel on the backside of the Barrier Beach out in Eastham, those aren't aids to navigation. Those are reference markers. The Coast Guard doesn't even acknowledge those. The Coast Guard looks at the inside of Nauset Inlet as non-navigable. They will not bring their rescue vessels in there. They will fly a helo over the top and locate somebody and do their best to find these people for us. But it's still our responsibility in these areas that have shallow water to do our best to rescue these folks. And I understand what Jamie's saying. The expectation on the outside is different, but when you have somebody on the inside and you can't get to them because you haven't investigated dredging a proper channel to be able to, reach out to these folks that have put themselves in peril. And let's face it, folks, more and more people are recreating nowadays. Everybody and their brother has a kayak, a stand-up paddleboard. We have businesses in town that are renting these things and sending them out into these areas. When you talk about, collecting some data from over the years, it doesn't matter until it matters. Just because the majority of these calls are good intent, and we send out everybody in every agency to look for these people, and generally, most of the time, they return home safely. It's going to be that one time where the harbor master and the fire chief said, sorry, we can't get out there. And that's when we're going to find the person that we could have saved the next day or once we have water in there. It's hard to sleep at night when it's your responsibility to be responsible for that.
Thank you, Nate.
All right, so it sounds like I will get together with both towns and try to document this, need for, project based on public safety and just past instances. I think keeping Nate's comments in mind that it's, it's not always the past data that matters, but, it's the one we can't get to in the future, just to consider that. So, but I'll work with the towns to gather that data.
And Charlie, Leslie, just a quick one. And this is a feature I've learned in a couple of weeks, but there is a transcript that's automatically being created. I don't know how accurate, Leslie, but if you link to that right before Sarah shuts it down, you'll have literally everything everyone said. Might be a good record to go back, particularly a few key points you heard.
Okay, thank you. All right. So still on this first comment here, that there was a comment that this 100-foot wide channel would have negative impacts on the stability of the barrier beach. And so one of the things that we did when we prepared this EENF was we went and looked at the history of sort of the geomorphologic changes along the barrier beach. So we know it's been migrating to the north. Everybody knows that. Since 1938, it breached in the middle about 1990, 94. There were two inlets for a while. The northerly inlet closed, and then the southerly inlet's been migrating further to the north for the past 20 years. But we also looked at westerly migration of the barrier beach. And this is all in the EENF. I don't have the slides with me tonight, but I urge you to go look at this in the existing conditions section. So we looked at westerly migration of the barrier beach over the last 20 years and changes in the width of the barrier beach. And what we found is that it's not migrating in the estuary the way, many barrier beaches do. The only place that it is doing that, there's one exception, and that's down sort of at the end of the Priscilla Spur, right, right below the Nauset bluffs at Nauset Heights, where there's that big overwash fan. And in that area, the barrier beach is migrating to the west into the estuary. But in the areas behind the barrier beach, north of, say, Turn Island, we don't see any significant migration of that barrier beach into the channel area, into the estuary. As far as narrowing of the barrier beach, we do see some narrowing of the barrier beach, not from erosion along the estuary side, but more from erosion along the ocean side. So, I urge you again to go look in that EENF at those data analyses. We used really good data sets for the last 20 years to gather that sort of information and generate it. And we use that information to conclude that, this 100-foot channel, which will be offset from the back of the barrier beach by 100 feet. There's this no dredge zone along the back of the barrier beach that's 100 feet wide. That dredging scenario, that design will not impact the stability of the barrier beach. And by having that 100-foot no dredge zone, originally we had thought 300 feet. We reduced it to 100 feet because, again, we didn't see this westerly migration. So, we could get a little bit closer to the back of the barrier beach without affecting its stability. And by going 100 feet or having that 100-foot no dredge zone, we can also get to some of the areas that are really trouble spots in terms of shoaling in the channel that are in that area between 100 and 200 feet off the back of the barrier beach. So that's why we switched from 300-foot no dredge zone to a 100-foot dredge zone. And we do not feel like the current dredge design is going to have any impacts on the stability of the barrier beach. So those are sort of the main points about that channel, the channel design. I see Shayna has a hand up. So Charlie, is it okay if we take questions on this now? Okay.
Absolutely, thanks.
So we're not going with what the regulators had recommended, which was the 300-foot off the back of the barrier beach as a buffer. And my follow-up question is, does that change the overall dredging volume?
The volumes that are presented in the EENF are based on the design that we're talking about. So it's the 100-foot wide channel behind the barrier beach with this 100-foot no dredge zone. The regulators didn't say we had to have 300 feet. I think we originally came up with that. And then, through the process of doing this analysis of the geomorphology along the barrier beach, decided that we could get by with the 100 foot.
I think it's also true that at the time, there was a lot of very generalized information that people were working from, and now we've got a much more comprehensive, detailed analysis available, which will be useful to the regulators as well as to us as we go forward. I mean, we were working at a very schematic level, if you will, when we were having those initial discussions.
If I could just ask a follow-up question. We had the Center for Coastal Studies do a review, which I'm sure you looked at as part of your, analysis of the barrier beach. And I'm just wondering how, basically they were saying that the barrier beach is sort of migrating landward, which they do. And there's some new information that they're evaluating that may indicate that the barrier beach is sort of an erosion hotspot that's kind of migrated down from where it formerly was kind of in the Wellfleet-Truro area. So I'm just wondering if you factor that, or just confirming that you factor that information in from that initial study that we had Center for Coastal Studies put together in 2019.
When we looked at that study, Shana, it didn't show, anything different than what we're looking at right now. I know that they're doing or updating some of those data right now. Maybe they'll find something different that we haven't found. And if so, I would welcome looking at that and making adjustments if we need to. But I mean, I was surprised, honestly, that we didn't see any sort of migration into the estuary, because that's typically how barrier beaches maintain themselves. And so I was truly surprised. I think it's in part because of the currents that are sort of pushing against the back of the channel and preventing it from migrating to the west. And in those areas where we do see any sort of erosion along the backside of the barrier beach, it is where the channels are closest to the backside of the barrier beach. Those are the areas that we're not going to be dredging. So those are the areas that are within that 100-foot no-touch zone.
Okay. So I guess it's just, want to maybe think about, or, maybe talk to the Center for Coastal Studies, because if the barrier beach is not migrating landward and it is becoming more narrow, what that might mean for the future of the barrier beach. And maybe that's a question that they're going to answer in their barrier beach configuration study.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, what we're seeing in terms of the width of the barrier beach is that where it is getting narrow, it's getting narrow from the ocean side. So, it's at some point, I do expect the barrier beach to breach. And I think that would be a good thing, both for the water quality in the estuary and It would eliminate the need to dredge in behind the barrier beach. And I think that, it would be a good scenario. But until that time, we have a need for boats to get in and out and back along the barrier beach. So that's kind of where we are at this point. But I'm happy to go back. I'm happy to call Mark and talk to him about this. And
I mean, I think it will be helpful to have that. I mean, I think a lot of that may be, come up in the study that they're working on, that I think they're going to have completed in about a year from now.
Yeah.
Just one comment on that CCS study. If my memory serves me well, there was at the time of that study a bit of misinformation in the hands of the Center for Coastal Studies about the setbacks of the channel from the barrier beach. And there was concern expressed in that 2019 study about risks to the barrier beach from the channel being there. And I think that was based on some lack of information that CCS had. And I think subsequently Leslie and Mark Borelli had a conversation to clarify the facts of the situation. And I think Mark acknowledged, if my memory serves me correctly, that he now had a better understanding of where the channel would be and how it wouldn't undercut or damage the barrier beach.
Charlie, you're right. But at that time we were talking, I mean, he didn't realize we had an offset off the back of the barrier beach, but at that time we were talking about a 300-foot offset. So I think Shana's got a good point. We should, connect with him and try to get, his sort of opinion about this 100-foot offset.
Great. Very good.
All right. All right, I'm gonna try to make this smaller here. All right. All right. Next topic is our assessment of alternatives. The comment was we need to include the no dredge alternatives. We did briefly discuss it, but didn't include it in any of our matrices. So I agree, we ought to add that to the matrices, and we'll do that. The other comment about the assessment of alternatives with the rating system was flawed and that all criteria should be rated on the same scale. So I just wanted to bring up that the current rating system was something that was developed jointly with the two select boards back in 2019. So we came to the select boards with a particular rating system, and they expanded the ranges for some topics and narrowed them for others. So, if this group decides that we need to go back and revise that again, then that's one thing, but we need to all agree on what it is and sort of stick to it.
Leslie, but can you just remind me when that was done? Just so I can go back to, because I had been asked that by a few folks.
Yeah, it was March of 2019, and then we revised it by May of 2019.
Was it a joint meeting?
Yes. So I've got the PowerPoint presentations and the notes if that's something that you need.
Yeah, I'll have to pass that along. Thank you.
Yep. So, but I also wanted to just, acknowledge or let you guys know that, I mean, this matrix concept, it's a multi-variable decision tool that uses value judgment upon, based on what the stakeholders feel is most important to score and rank these alternatives. And so as an example, when we first of all came to the group back in March of 2019, I think we had permittability as a high, from 1 to 10 or something like that. And then number of businesses served was a smaller range. And so because one of the purposes or one of the benefits of the project is to help serve those businesses that are in the estuary, the boards of selectmen wanted to expand that range because that was an important part of the project, and to give that benefit a greater weight in this matrix. And so that's an example of it being this tool that's got multi-variables that's based on value judgment. And so like I said, I'm happy to go back and re-look at these things if you want, but if we do, I want to have consensus among this group that, what we're doing is it. And we're not going to change our minds again. So Harry's got his hand up, and maybe Shayna, or is that from before Shayna? Okay.
So who are you calling on? Shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it, Harry.
Yeah, well, I appreciate and certainly don't know what was agreed to in 2019. What I can say is that the business-related scoring rankings all go from 0 to 10, and the environmental impact rankings go from 0 to 5. And
that's not true in every case, but
well, environmental impacts for eelgrass, shellfish, salt marsh, and intertidal areas all go from 0 to 5. And the business-related access to landings, improvements, safety, businesses served are all 0 to 10. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, to look at that and determine that this is skewed towards driving approval of dredging as an approved alternative, and that if someone from an environmental perspective looked at this and said, we rate environmental impacts at the same scale as the business impacts, 0 to 10, and we consider the no dredge alternative, that we could come up with a very, very different result. And so I certainly would hope that the boards would consider improving the or increasing the weighting for environmental impacts to be the same as business, and then let the chips fall where they may, rather than have the weighting be skewed from the beginning.
I have to say that from my perspective, at least, the fact that this system was approved in the past and has been used, it feels wrong to go back and redo all of this. It just doesn't seem consistent with the process we've been on for quite some time. I think can all agree that different people might apply a different value to one element or another. I could certainly do the same in other ways. But for this group to get mired down in debate about the rating that one element gets versus another doesn't feel to me like the best use of this group's time. It would seem to me that we would be better served by focusing more generally on the EENF and what its output is, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel that was invented 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think Charlie will again be agreeing to disagree because, of course, given the fact that the business-related interests are rated highly, and this rating system is skewed against the impacts to the natural environment, you would be very much in favor of keeping it the way it is. So I understand that that is your position. I would think that in the essence of fairness, it would be appropriate to open it up to an evaluation by the current board to determine whether it's still, that is still the way the current East End board feels about it.
Maybe we'll leave it there.
I thought Jamie was here. Jamie's got her hand up.
Jamie, you're muted. Thank you.
Thank you. This was unrelated. Thank you, Harry, for the comments. I don't know if you're addressing this or not, but there is a panelist question just about some comments that were made a little while ago. Someone was asking if Leslie Fields, if your comments to Mark Borelli were in writing or somewhere that they could see the concerns that were raised, or if there's some place they're stored online, they can see those.
The comments to Mark?
Comments to Mark Borelli, yes, in writing.
So the town of Eastham hired Center for Coastal Studies to make comments on this project a while ago, back in, I don't know, maybe it was 2019-ish. And Mark wrote a report. I didn't specifically give Mark any of my comments in writing, but we did, I guess, have a meeting and talk about it with everybody, 2 boards of selectmen. And there were some things that he didn't understand, like we had the offset back from, the no dredge zone behind the Barrier Beach. He didn't understand that when he wrote the report. After he heard about it, he thought it was less of an issue, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. So, I think it's fair that that I talk to him about it, or that you guys, just let's talk about it and see what he thinks about the 100-foot zone. But I don't think there's anything in writing where I gave Mark my comments, if that's what you're asking for.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I hope that addresses it. If not, I'm sure that they're writing comments in the chat, so you can always pop.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm not tracking that.
Yeah, check that.
Thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Let's see. Kevin's got his hand up.
Thanks, Leslie. Charlie, just one point in terms of the comment made about going back to the rating system. If I remember, and Jamie, you might check your records, there were 2 meetings held at the Eastham Public Library. And if I remember, we were looking at many, many options in terms of behind Hemingway Landing, different routes. So that tool was used really for that purpose, was to refine us down to where we are now. So to the point that was previously made about redoing the whole rating system, I think it has served its purpose to get us to here. I really don't think we need to revisit the rating system. I think we really need to dig on what we're talking about now is, how do we permit this? What are the impacts? What are the concerns that we need to address and move forward? I really think it served its purpose back then, but if there's more helpful information to look at refinements or ratings within options we've got, but we really, to me, have the design roughed out. I think there'll be a number of other things that will come out through the evaluation of it by regulators and even ourselves. But I think we really want to move on beyond that. Thank you.
All right, Harry and Jamie still have their hands up. I don't know if that's from before or now.
I'll let Harry go. I think he'll probably address any concerns.
Well, my hand is up from before. I disagree 100%. I think that these ratings should be equal. Environmental considerations should have equal weight with the business concerns, full stop. That's the end of my comment.
Yeah, and I guess just as a representative of the board here, I do know that was a concern for some of our board members. For that reason, I can't speak for them. I'm just acknowledging that was a concern of board members, that the rating system was skewed. As to how to proceed with that, I guess I don't have a suggestion, but I do want to acknowledge that is an issue.
Jackie has a comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back, I think, to reframe this a little bit, Leslie. The issue for some of our board members may be that they think it's unfair, But what I think is important at this stage of the ENF is to realize that if we are putting this forward, some of the regulators will think that this criteria is not fair. And that's what you should be worried about, not what any of us in this, forum think. Because if you're sending this to permitting authorities, they may notice what Harry has pointed out. And if they don't, he's going to point it out in the comments. So it's going to be part of it, and we might as well figure out what you're going to say to address it. And that's all I have to say. Sorry.
I think that's a good point. And to be honest, I'm concerned about what all of you have to say and what the regulators have to say. So just know that. I think that, if we've picked the most robust alternatives, even if we even out the scoring system, I think that the chips might still fall in the same place. And that's really a test of whether or not the alternatives we've selected are the most robust or not. Yeah. So I'm happy to take a quick shot at it and see what happens and bring it back to this group, or I don't want to drive what's going on, but I think Jackie has a pretty good point that the regulators may come back and say, well, we didn't like what how your rating system was set up. So like I said, I'm happy to take another look at it and let you know what I find.
And Leslie, if I can just jump in again, I don't mean to belabor it, but I do think the purpose of that tool back then was to hone in on those options that we really didn't want to go to. I mean, it really highlighted, we do not want to go through Hemingway Landing. We don't want to open up traffic through an area that's already under stress. So I think it served its point at that point in time. But and I think that's how you could frame it. I think that's the reason that rating system was developed, so we could eliminate options.
Just to keep us moving along, why don't we move along? And Leslie, you may take some time to think about the rating system issue, but I think we've beaten this horse as much we can tonight.
Okay, all right. I'll probably take another look at it and sort of use the comments that I've received from everyone and see if we can't make everybody happy, if that's at all possible. All right. Next topic is sidecast dredging. So I had a number of questions about the sidecast dredging. Again, this is proposed for the area behind the barrier beach. And so I guess first question was sort of more of a pointed question, but do the calculations for temporary impacts from sidecast dredging include the 60 to 80 foot wide area where the sand will be sidecast? And I wanted to first of all just clarify that in the ENF, temporary impacts refer to impacts associated with any sort of construction access along the barrier beach or anything like that, as well as any sort of areas where the dredge pipeline would be laid. Okay, so those are considered temporary impacts. Permanent impacts are anything within the dredge footprint or the dewatering area dune enhancement footprint. So it's important just to keep that in mind. In terms of impacts associated with sidecast dredging, we have a table in the ENF. All the impacts associated with sidecast dredging were counted as permanent. And so that's that 60 to 80 foot zone were considered permanent because we'd be casting material there. So that's within the footprint of the project. So I hope that answers that question. Second question or statement was really that sidecast dredging is not appropriate since it doesn't remove material from the dynamic areas and able to migrate back into the channel. So I know that sidecast dredging is not a commonly used method of dredging in New England. It is used elsewhere in the country. And it's specifically used for areas just like Nauset Estuary. So small inlets and waterways where they've got high current velocities and shallow depths, and it's a preferable method to dredging in those areas rather than this hydraulic pipeline dredge. And partly that's because the sidecast dredge is more maneuverable in those high current velocities, and it's not sort of tethered to this discharge pipe, which, you know, it sometimes makes it sort of dangerous and hard to maneuver the dredge. It does cast material back into the waterway rather than remove it. So in my mind, that could be seen as a benefit since it's not removing material from the system, you know, in terms of sort of sediment management. It does sort of reduce the longevity of the dredge channel. But in this area, which is highly dynamic anyways, you know, we think that frequent dredging is going to be required, whether it's hydraulic pipeline dredging or sidecast dredging. And then one other comment about the sidecast dredging method is that, you know, we think this method makes sense here given the lack of any other sort of nearby beneficial reuse alternatives. We can't pump it to the barrier beach. It's in the Park Service, National Park. And it's too far to pump down to Nauset Estuary or down to Nauset Public Beach from the northern end of the dredge channel. So we think it's the dredge method that makes the most sense in this area. I'm going to go ahead and address this last one and then take comments. There was a comment that the sidecast dredging, so this area where we're casting this material 60 to 80 feet from the channel, should not impact access to Cable Creek. Totally agree. So we need to update the EENF to reflect this and have an area there where we're not actually casting material into that channel. Okay, comment. So Harry and Shayna have their hands up. Harry, I don't know if that's from last time or this time.
Well, it's helping me because I don't have to raise it this time. Regarding Cable Creek, you're not casting material in, but does your sidecast dredging enhance the channel to Cable Creek?
Enhance it or make it shallower?
Enhance it.
No, it's not meant to enhance it, no.
So it's essentially having no impact to Cable Creek.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, and Shayna.
Who has a sidecast dredge in the area? Is it the county or?
The county doesn't, but we have talked to them, and they would be interested in having one of those. They'd like to be able to use it in other areas, and so they could either retrofit one of the dredges they have that could become a sidecast dredge, and they can sort of go back and forth between sidecast and pipeline dredge.
Yeah, Shana, for what it's worth, I also had conversations with the manufacturer of the dredges that the county uses, and there's a retrofit capability for the sidecast equipment that is not, a big deal in the final analysis. So yes, the county dredges could be adapted.
Okay, thank you.
Nate's got his hands up.
I just wanted to mention, through this whole process, we've looked at how difficult mobilization will be and set up for this project. And, that's really why we started having the conversation about sidecast dredging. We understand it's outside of the box, but I think, it may be the most practical way to approach dredging on the backside of the Barrier Beach. That being said, we need to look at the environmental impacts of, what could result from it. And it's so important. We talked about this at the last meeting. This is a fact gathering mission right now. And I think we should have this conversation and ask for this conversation with the regulators. They're doing this in other parts of the country. It may be the most practical or really the only true productive way to address the shoaling on the backside of that Barrier Beach on a regular basis. So I think it would be really a disservice to us to not include it and not to engage regulators to have this discussion.
All right, Shana, do you have another question?
I don't have another question. Thank you.
Harry does.
I just wanted to address something about the permitting process and gathering information. And Leslie, maybe you could elaborate from your perspective. In my experience, the permitting process is that you create a permit application that includes the information that you gather, and then you submit it to the regulatory authorities for their review. And that the permitting process is not the data gathering process. It is the regulatory evaluation process. And there seems to be a degree of confusion over this that came up during the joint meeting of the East End and Orleans Select Board, whereby it seemed to come out that the permitting process was the information gathering process. And my perspective is that that's what your group has been doing, and that's what's gone into the ENF, and that's what creates the permit application.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, we've spent the last 5 years or so collecting all this data, and we've got the ENF, expanded ENF that provides all the data. It's a compendium of everything we've done so far. There's a lot of data in there, and we've used it to develop alternatives, evaluate those alternatives, select a preferred alternative, and go forward with the design. So I do expect the regulators to look at that information and provide feedback. They may ask for more studies or more evaluation in certain areas where they feel like maybe our data is not robust enough, but we'll never know until we submit the permit application and we get the feedback from them. So that's I think where we are at this point.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. So
yep.
just to recap, the permitting process is not the data gathering process, and that any discussion around that is somewhat disingenuous.
I don't think it was disingenuous, Harry. I think what Leslie was saying is that the permitting process may generate requests for additional information beyond what we've generated already, which is the norm. That is what every permitting process often involves, is back and forth between the applicant and the regulators. I think we're following a very traditional process here, and we expect the regulators may request something additional, but we can't know what it is until we get into the process.
And if I can add, Charlie, this is Kevin. I think the comment that this individual is making might have been to me, where I do find this is an opportunity for us to learn. We learn from our regulators, but let's be honest, folks, we do not know everything about this estuary, and we should be open to learn, not only from regulators, but I believe through the public comment process that each of these windows of input will provide. We're going to learn something also from the public, whether it be the commercial boating officials who might chime in or other folks. So the comment made, I will continue to learn through this process, and I welcome that.
Right, Sophia, do you have a question?
Hi. For those of you who don't know, I'm Sophia Fox. I'm the aquatic ecologist at the Cape Cod National Seashore. I have a question about the Sidecast dredging. The 60 to 80 feet that you use, is that the standard for side casting based on the equipment?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Okay, and then do you, are you it seems from what Nate said and everything that evaluating the environmental impacts of this, if it's widely used elsewhere, would be not that difficult in terms of what kinds of things come up in permitting this type of activity in other locations, potentially other similar locations. How much material then would we expect to be sort of layered up on the adjacent area?
In terms of thickness?
Of cubic yardage coming out of that back barrier channel for the 100-foot wide channel.
Yeah, I don't remember what the dredge, I'm embarrassed to say, let me just check here.
I should know too.
Can't remember what the dredge volume is back and behind the barrier beach, but I can calculate the thickness if that's something that, I mean, I could see where that would be a question you would have.
I guess it seems like something that's worth having in this document, that evaluation. What's the thickness that would be applied to, and then what are the common impacts and how does that thickness, you know?
Yeah. So I can tell you that we did do some research on papers that looked at this sidecast dredging method. There aren't a lot of them out there. There's a few Corps of Engineer documents that look at impacts of sidecast dredging. And a lot of them are the same as what you'll get with regular dredging. So, you know, there's turbidity, increases in turbidity. We don't expect that to be much of an issue behind the barrier beach because it is all granular and there's not many fines. And then there's, you know, covering of benthic organisms. And so that's where this thickness question comes in. But we also know that it's an area that's really highly dynamic already. And so whatever's living there is used to being sort of covered and uncovered from sediment moving around. And so, you know, it's sort of like a beach nourishment project where when those organisms are covered, what we find with beach nourishment is that they recolonize within, you know, under a year is what sort of the Corps of Engineers data show for beach nourishment projects. They don't have that level of information from these Corps reports on the sidecast dredging, but I think we can extrapolate some of those results to this, you know, to this project here and say that a lot of those organisms would recolonize within the next year.
Yeah, I guess I definitely think that's worth including.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else have, Nate, you got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to just clarify, and I appreciate Harry's comments. When I spoke of, you know, the fact finding and to engage the regulators, sidecast dredging is non-traditional in this region. And after much review, it may be that this project is a model project for that. And I'm interested to hear what the regulators have to say about this unique situation and this unique proposal. We're not going to know until we ask. And I think this is, you know, it's all part of this process. We're not going to think of everything. Like Leslie said, these, you know, it's only been done so many places. And let's engage these regulators. This is their job to actually, you know, bring forward concerns on their end so that we, you know, just like Kevin has mentioned, we're not going to think of everything, especially with a non-traditional technology that we're looking at. Thank you.
Shana, are you?
Yes, I had a question about just the logistics that had to do with the spring high tide. Are you going to answer that later on?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I can answer it now, but I think there was a question about, you know, well, we said in the ENF that the dredge had to come in on a spring high tide. And I think that was interpreted to mean like the highest spring tide of the year. It's really just a monthly spring tide. So on and about, you know, spring tide each month, the dredge would need to come in, higher high tide, and leave then too. So I think there were concerns that the dredge would come in on an annual spring tide and be stuck there for a year. And that's not the case. It's you know, just a regular lunar spring high tide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jeff, do you have a question?
Yeah, Leslie, just wanted to confirm I heard you correctly. So I think earlier you said that you didn't think that the use of side casting behind the barrier would influence the frequency of repeated dredging? Is that based on grain size analysis, or is that just based on other side cast operations that you've looked into?
No, if you interpreted me to say that, that's not what I meant. So,
okay, sorry.
I do think that sidecast dredging there will be more frequent dredging needed because we're doing sidecast. I do think that.
Okay.
Because we're not removing the material from the system. But here again, this is a highly dynamic area. I think it's going to be hard to maintain any channel in there for, an entire year before some equipment has to come back, whether it's sidecast dredged or, more conventional hydraulic pipeline dredging.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. Next
Leslie,
topic.
One quick one, and I know I should have remembered it, but how much did you address the maintenance aspect that's contemplated in the draft?
We use some sort of general rules of thumb. So it's, they're estimates, Kevin. And so we were estimating that behind the Barrier Beach, you need to come in and sort of do some spot maintenance dredging almost every year.
Okay.
If you wanted to maintain that exact channel width and depth.
So elsewhere in the channel, back to Town Cove, Kevin, it would be much more infrequent, between 8 and 15 years between cycles of dredging.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, next topic is on the shellfish relay. So just to refresh everybody's memory, one thing we had proposed in the way of mitigation for impacts to land-containing shellfish was relays in areas that are going to be dredged before the dredging each year. And the question came up, well, have you developed a plan for the relays? So, who's going to
explain what the relays are, Leslie, for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so you basically get equipment in there and you remove the shellfish and you plant them somewhere else where there's not going to be impacts of dredging. And so, the plan would include things like, when are you going to do it? Who's going to do it? How is it going to be done? Where are the shellfish going to go? Things like that. So, we haven't developed a plan for that, but we can, if that's what this group wants. And I think it's probably a pretty good idea to go ahead and hash out as many details as we can. I'd be happy to work with folks from both towns and just hash out what we can as far as a plan for that goes.
If I recall a prior meeting, there was some discussion about having Nate Sears and the East Ham representative work on that together.
Yeah. So if the group's happy with me doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start that process. So,
Leslie, I think at our joint meeting when we talked about the second memorandum of agreement, I think both boards did recommend that we either be open to that or certainly show to the regulators that we feel it's important to have a plan, whether it be the first draft, but I think putting work in this will be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Harry, do you have a question?
Yes, that plan that has not been developed yet, will it be available in draft form to the Nauset Estuary Study Group for review prior to submittal?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll try to get going on it right away, so we'll get it out to you in the next couple of weeks or so. Another question about the shellfish relay comment was, we need to evaluate whether or not the shellfish relays are enough. Is that enough to mitigate the impacts? And so, my comments on that are that Mass DMF and NOAA Fisheries, they're going to evaluate this relay plan during the permitting process. And if they feel like additional measures are needed or the plan needs to be changed, we're going to hear from them. And we may be required to do something additional. I'm not sure. We could have to modify the channel location or, modifications of the design. Other possibilities would be, additional money for shellfish reseeding in this estuary or somewhere else, support for local aquaculture. There's any number of things that could be and have been asked for in terms of mitigation for impacts to shellfish. So we're starting with the shellfish relay plan. and to try to really avoid impacts to those shellfish by removing them and putting them somewhere else. If the agencies feel like we need to do something else, then we're going to have to deal with that at that point through the permitting process.
Leslie, is it accurate to say that the technique of doing shellfish relays is not unfamiliar to the regulators?
No, it's not unfamiliar. I mean, we've worked on projects where they've done that. We did a lot of shellfish relays down in Centerville River years ago, and we did a project down there. And they have, I think Nate knows about this, but they have like a shellfish dredge, sort of a conveyor belt sort of thing that just digs them up and gets them out of the channel pretty quickly. So there's different ways of doing it. So, but all that should be hashed out in the plan. So I think that was a really good comment that we got on this document. Then the other question was, how much will the shellfish relays cost? We haven't developed cost for that yet. I think it's something we could sort of estimate when we put the plan together. So we'll try to come up with some ballpark figures for that as well. Okay. Resource area alterations and impacts. So there was a question, is mitigation proposed for permanent impacts to resources? So here again, I wanted to remind the group the difference between permanent and temporary impacts in this document. Permanent impacts are areas like the dredge footprint or the footprint of the sidecast dredge area or sidecast area, or the dune restoration area. And temporary impacts are those where there's construction access or the pipeline. So even though we've defined the dredge areas as being permanent impacts, we know there's shoaling that's going to occur in there. And after a while, that permanent impact will be sort of diminished and because there's going to be shoaling going on there. In terms of mitigation, for impacts, again, we are proposing a shellfish relay. We're proposing dune enhancement in that area north of Nauset Public Beach. And the project will adhere to any sort of time of year restrictions for shorebirds or fisheries. So those are the mitigations that we're proposing at this point. The question was whether or not the EENF documents, whether or not the project will avoid changes in marine productivity. So here again, we're proposing to follow agency specified time of year restrictions that are designed specifically to avoid and minimize impacts to marine productivity. That's the purpose of those toys, and we're proposing to follow those. Another question, will changes to channel hydrodynamics impact shellfish habitat and water quality? Early on in this project, we did some numerical modeling of the proposed project, and that modeling did show that there would be no measurable changes to water quality, either positive or negative, because of the dredging, and that water quality, there's going to be no changes in water quality that are going to impact shellfish habitat. And then another comment was we need to do a traffic study for the area around Goose Hummock. So one thing I'm suggesting here is that we can ask some materials handlers to sort of weigh in on how they would navigate the area right around Goose Hummock and get back onto the highway, and evaluate whether or not we need to do some sort of a traffic study by just talking to them about logistics. All right, Shana.
So I think one or two of the questions was mine, and I guess maybe you're going to potentially address it later on, but I just feel like with the amount of dredging, however many hundreds of thousands of cubic yards, I think that more mitigation is going to come up somewhere along the process. I think that the dune enhancement idea is helpful. I think that the time of year and the replanting of disturbed areas is just sort of boilerplate things that you would do normally as part of any project. So I think just, with that amount of dredging, I guess the regulators want to see that it's going to be balanced in a way that's going to enhance the resource area almost in a better way than when you found it. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be addressed here, but I feel like at some point along the way, it's going to emerge in the discussion.
Okay, thanks for that comment. And you may be right, and if so, we are going to have to address it if it comes up. Okay, here was a bunch of questions about restoration of disturbed areas, and I think this has to do with sections of the ENF where we talked about disturbance on the barrier beach and in the dunes. So the questions were, what areas are proposed to be disturbed? Those are the areas in the ENF that refer to, the beach and the dune where the pipe's going to be laid or picked up, and where the dewatering basin and dune enhancement's proposed. Another question, have the areas of disturbance been calculated? Yep, we did calculate all those areas of disturbance. It's all reflected in the ENF. We did sort of include a 25-foot zone along the pipeline route for all equipment access, so that's factored into those areas of disturbance. What's causing the disturbance? We've got wheeled front end loaders laying down the pipe and picking it up. We've got excavation in the dune for that dewatering basin, and then regrading post-construction to restore grades to their pre-construction elevations, except for in the dune area where we're going to have more material and higher elevations. And then who's responsible for restoring the disturbed areas? So all that restoration work, regrading, replanting where necessary is going to be the responsibility of the selected contractor. All right, looks like I got questions from Lauren and Nate. So Lauren, you want to go first?
Sure. In just reviewing the materials and having a discussion about them, one thing that we would benefit from is really having a close-up of the land masses and the disturbance areas on the land masses.
So like a close-up graphic showing
land ownership on those land masses, yes, and the areas of disturbance. It's hard at the scale in the EENF, so that would be helpful. Maybe you have maps that you could share online that we could blow up, that kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. Good comment. Nate?
I tried to catch you with the last slide, just to backpedal slightly less.
Sorry.
If you could include with the traffic study for Goose Hummock, impact to local business, probably just want to have a conversation with the shops there about how we can least impact them.
Okay. One thing to note is that it is going to be happening in the winter. So hopefully that will minimize, disturbance in their busy season. So that's one good thing. But I think it's a good idea to talk to them.
And Leslie, just not that it's equivalent, but just from a standpoint of communication outreach, both of our towns have, I think, upped their game, both Eastham with water, because they've ripped up a few roads over the last few years, and Eastham now, Orleans with 2 years of sewer construction. So I think from the communication standpoint, like Nate was pointing out with business impacts and traffic, we have some models that are showing good effect, including, as you just pointed out, no construction during tourist season.
Okay. Right. Lauren, you still have another question? Or are you all done? Okay. All right. Okay, so this is the previous slide. This is the one we just talked about. Post-construction and monitoring plan, there was a question as whether or not we have one that's been developed. We do. It's section J of the ENF. Property owner notifications. This is a good one. So we did identify that the pipeline has to pass along two properties owned privately and one property owned by the seashore. So the question was, have the property owners been notified? We haven't officially notified anybody. I mean, the seashore is on this call today and obviously, looked through the ENF. So, and been at the meetings right along. So they're aware of at least the fact that we're likely going to need to put the pipeline across the beach on the government property there. We do need to reach out to the other two property owners, and that will take place shortly. Lauren.
Yeah, that again, it would be great to have acreage or something of that nature versus we're going to look at the maps, but having you tell us what the impact may be will be very helpful to us.
So you're saying like impact just on that, like we have one big number, but you'd like it per property owner or something like that, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. Shayna.
Do the property owners need to provide written permission as part of the application with this, or is that just locally?
Well, they would, normally we would ask for that at the Conservation Commission level when we file a notice of intent. I mean, if we can get something from them beforehand, that would be great.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it's part of the MIPA and NEPA process as well.
I don't know about NEPA, but it's not a part of the MIPA. It's not a requirement for MIPA.
Okay.
Lauren, do you have another question? Okay.
But Leslie, to that point, they will all be notified because they're going to be an affected or potentially an affected property owner. So
correct.
Through this, they'll get notified.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Yes. Construction activity impacts. Okay, so there's a bunch of questions here. So where will the fuel be stored? So we need fuel for the dredges. We need fuel for the booster pumps, for the boats, things like that. So where will it be stored and how much will be stored? All of that material is going to be stored offsite at approved fuel storage distribution facilities. So they will come, in a tanker and refuel the boats right at the dock. Just the way, other big boats are refueled there. The booster pumps, they will have to drive to the booster pump that's at the base of Calanans Pass and refuel that there. So that will be a sort of a big refueling truck that will go down and refuel that booster pump. But nothing will be stored on site in terms of fuel, except for in the equipment. This one we've already talked about, how will hydraulic sidecast dredge gain access to the estuary? So as I said, through the inlet, centered around a monthly spring tide. Have we developed costs? We also in the EENF addressed the fact that, it's possible that we could bring this sidecast dredge in via the upland, via truck. And it would be launched at Goose Hummock. If we do that, the question was, have we factored in costs for that? No, we haven't, not at this point. So those costs they haven't been factored in. We can come up with them if the group wants it, but right now we don't have costs for that. Describe impacts of trucks at Goose Hummock. So we're estimating about 10 truck trips a day for about 61 days. That's what would be needed to take the material off. If we can get some bigger roll-off containers, we could minimize those number of truck trips down to 6 or 8. But that's what we're talking about if we're going to dredge that entire 9,600 cubic yards in 1 year and take it off site. And I'm going to address this last one, and then I'll take questions. So will the expected time of year windows allow for the 50 days of dredging that's expected for it to be required for the channel behind the barrier beach? We do think they will allow for that. The toys are expected to allow the dredging to occur between October 1 and January 15. And that's well more than 50 days, which would allow for downtime due to weather and maintenance and things like that. Okay. Lauren, do you have a question? No. Okay, Harry.
Thank you. Leslie, could you describe the process of offloading the dredge spoil at the Goose Hummock loading dock?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
There's also a whole construction methodology section in the EENF. So if you want to know lots of details, I urge you to take a look at that. But yeah, just in sort of a broad brush, the material would be put into barges that would essentially become roll-off barges. So the material the barge could just be sort of brought up the ramp at Goose Hummock. Okay, and the material is mostly sandy, so it's going to dewater relatively quickly in the estuary as it's waiting to be hauled to Goose Hummock. If we feel like more material, if we feel like more dewatering is needed before it goes down the road, it's going to have to be pulled over into the Goose Hummock public parking lot, which will be rimmed with siltation barriers and things like that. And once it's dewatered, then the material will be loaded onto a truck and taken away.
Thank you. And the roll-offs, what is the volume of those?
We don't have that number on the top of my head, but it's definitely in that detailed construction methodology section.
Okay, thank you.
Shayna.
So just to clarify, just confirming. So the 10 truck trips, that's like on average. So if it goes faster, it could be 60 in a day, depending on how fast the project is going.
I don't think it would ever be 60 in a day. It might be 12 or 15, but I don't
Okay, so it would be kind of spread evenly throughout the duration of the project. It couldn't be condensed. Okay.
So that 10 truck trips a day is based on the production rate of that mechanical dredge.
Okay.
And we would have sort of 2 sets of barges going and whatnot, just to keep the operation running smoothly. Okay. Okay, we got questions here about the dewatering area and impacts along the beach. There was a question as to whether or not the impacts to the folks who live along Callahan's Pass could be minimized by bringing the pipeline in from Nauset Beach. So what's written in the EENF is that we would bring that pipe down Callahan's Pass, and that's the pipe that would be laid from the backside of the barrier beach at the end of the Priscilla Spur all the way over to, say, Callahan's Pass and onto the dewatering area. So the question was, instead of coming down Callahan's Pass with that, can you bring it from Nauset Public Beach, since you're going to have that area disturbed with the dewatering area? And the answer is absolutely, we can do that. It does mean that we'll have more sort of travel along the backside of the dune between Callahan's Pass and the dewatering area. So that area will have to be used to bring the pipeline in and to bring it out upon completion of the project. We can definitely make that change. Another question, how will work at the dewatering area impact existing footpaths to the beach? So right now there are 2 footpaths, one that's at the south end, right north of the Nauset Public Beach parking area. That one is closed off during construction because it's right in the middle of the whole dewatering area. The northerly one is just to the north of the dewatering basin, and we expect that that path will be open during the project. The path, as I said, that runs along the backside of the dune, it will be open, but there'll be the pipeline in the middle of the path, but they can just step over the pipeline. So access along that path won't be impacted. Will the dewatering area be used multiple times, and will it require materials management? So right now, we are thinking that this dewatering area is going to be used once and only once. And we're going to follow that with this dune enhancement project. So we're going to build the volume of the dune in this area. And there will be a need to rework the material during construction and through restoration of the dune. But after the area is restored, we're not going to have the need to be in there and rework the material. That was originally proposed when we were talking about reusing that material for beach nourishment elsewhere, but at this point, we're not proposing that anymore. So it's simply a dune enhancement project, and we can leave the material in the dune. Once it's restored, there's no reworking of the material. Are the booster pumps noisy? Yes, they can be noisy. So we can look into ways to mitigating that noise. I don't know what that is at this point, but we can look into it. And then how long will it take to build and restore that dewatering area? All told, between the time you'd start construction and finish restoring it, about 12 weeks. That includes about 3 weeks for dredging. So it's about 3 weeks at the beginning and 3 weeks at the end and 3 weeks in the middle. Any questions?
Leslie, just a quick one if I could, only because I did find it in your construction methodology. I did post to the panelists, but for any folks listening, on G2 of G8, you indicate the 61 working days using 10 roll-off containers. The smaller size would go into 16 cubic yard containers. And like you said, if you can get the larger containers, those could be 26 cubic yards and speed up the pace.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, you did the work.
Shana, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm just wondering.
Okay.
So will the dredge contractor, the person who's doing all the dredging in the marsh, be the same contractor that's going to be responsible for all the dewatering area and trucking and all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Likely it would be 2 contractors, and that's the way. So the Barnstable County Dredge these days is really mainly is doing the dredging, and not much of the land side operations. And so there would be the need for a separate contractor to build and maintain that dewatering basin. And either that contractor or a third one would be responsible for the trucking.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. This is my last slide generally. Other areas of questioning were project need. So I know we had this discussion at the beginning of this meeting. There were a lot of questions on this. And so, I just wanted to point out to this group that what we've presented in the EENF as far as need is improved navigation for commercial fisheries to help support their livelihood, improve public safety for both commercial and recreational boaters, public safety for those first responders trying to go out when they need to go out and help people, support for local businesses around the estuary whose livelihood counts on people being able to navigate and operate safely in the estuary. And then, in the bigger picture, sort of helping to support the local economies, via tourism. I would say that last one is not really much of a project need, but more of a project benefit. But that's what we've described in the EENF as far as project need. If there needs to be some other discussion about, what we say in the EENF in terms of project need, this group needs to have it. I know that MOU has some statement in there about how the towns are going to get together and address the project need. So I had one question I'm throwing back to the group is whether or not that statement is something that the towns are going to do now and feed that information to me to put in this EENF, or am I interpreting that statement incorrectly? So that was one question I had for this group. Jackie's shaking her head. So maybe I've misinterpreted it incorrectly. While she's thinking about that, Jamie, do you have a question?
Yes. Just on the project need, that last one you said about the local economies via tourism. Like you said, that wasn't really a project need. That was more of you viewed it as an added benefit. I think that's kind of a subjective view on it being an added benefit. And I wonder if that needs to be there.
Okay.
That's my opinion. It's all subjective, but just because there are a lot of question marks still, and there could be negative impacts to the economy or to the tourism as a result of this project too. We just don't know. So for me, that one's just kind of a subjective one, and I wonder if it has a place. Whereas the other ones, we can do data, we can do science, they're solid and tangible.
I think we mentioned something about benefits to tourism in the EENF. I can go back and take a look and see if we've sort of overstepped our bounds there, if it's just sort of a ancillary statement. So I'll do that. But if you want to take a look at it and feel like we've overstepped our bounds in that area, feel free to shoot me a comment.
Thanks, Leslie.
Leslie, I don't remember anything in the second MOU that says project need, but I'll look at it again and send you something if I see.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Harry, do you have a comment?
I do, and I'll keep it brief. The issue of public safety. I think that there is a tendency to conflate the issue of convenience with safety. And I think that that is something that has become somewhat confused. And I'll leave that statement there. The other is that it is my understanding that the East Ham rescue boat that is docked behind Goose Hummock can reach the inlet at any point in the tidal cycle.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll look into that when we start getting some statistics on rescues.
Okay.
All right. Who else? Well, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I was wondering if you could touch on real quickly on the red tide cyst research that was done and some of the outcomes that are in, I guess it's Appendix L or something. There's a number of, when you talk about some of the things here, some of the parameters like anoxia or salinity, you mentioned that additional studies might be required. Where do you sit, or where does the project sit on with the comfort level right now on having these sediment dewater in this area and the effectiveness of treating the red tide cysts? I know clearly if we have some really, really, really cold winters, it sounds like that'll be much more effective. But if we do have some mild winters after the dredging, what is the comfort level at this point?
Yeah, I think we feel really comfortable with material, with putting material in the dune and using it for dune restoration. We're not proposing to take it back out and use it somewhere else. It's going to be buried. We fully expect those cysts to die off after 6 months, which is what we found in our pilot project.
Right. Okay.
And so I don't think anybody has any concerns with putting that material in the dunes north of Nauset Beach in terms of the potential to spread any sort of red tide cyst to other areas. The material that would be offloaded from Town Cove, which also has some elevated red tide cyst concentrations, not as high as Priscilla or Mill Pond area, but still high enough to worry about. I do think that we should do some monitoring of the sites where that material is placed, just like we did in the pilot project, to demonstrate that material, that the cysts are dead in that material, especially since it could be resold or reused later on for some sort of beneficial reuse.
Okay, and are you proposing additional monitoring at the dewatering site on the beach as well, or you think that's, at this point, that'll be pretty much captured and sequestered underneath the existing, buried in the sediment?
Yeah, we're not proposing anything additional right now at the dune area.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Lauren?
Okay, I guess I have two items. One is I'll start on project need. I know this is for the communities versus the seashore, but when the seashore goes to do its impact analysis, I know we will look at having some kind of parameter for doing this project in an environmentally responsible fashion, or least environmentally invasive way. We will have some kind of parameter for that. I don't know if you guys want to have that. And second, this is just a practical suggestion for you. And I know I've only sort of skimmed everything at this point. Leslie, let me know if I'm off base, but I think it would be helpful for some of us. We've talked about how it's a 3-to-1 side slope on the channel width. Why is it 100 feet wide behind the barrier beach? Show us like a section so we can understand how wide is it at the bottom with that 3-to-1 slope versus the top, the width of the channel, so that we can kind of get it more. And, and maybe you want to do that in more than one location. Just a suggestion.
Okay, we have cross sections in the plans. I don't know if you saw the plans.
I've seen some cross sections. I'm not sure if I saw that. I didn't see that cross section, and maybe you have it.
I will. I'll make sure you see it. I'll
okay.
get it to you.
I just don't know if I tuned into the right location. Thank you.
I know it's a lot to look at.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yes, thanks.
All right, who else has a question? Jeff, do you have another question? Okay. Okay. Sophia.
I have a question that is outside of what we've talked about today, and has to do with the dredge zone footprint in the Priscilla Landing area, and how it spans both sides of the island in that area. And what that was sort of new to me from all of the alternatives that it spanned across the island to both sides. Is that an allowance for avoiding the area of seagrass, or is that for some other reason? It seems large.
Yeah, it was an allowance to go to to add the ability to go to the east of that little island. We're not talking about Turn Island. I don't know what that island's called.
Yeah, but I don't know what it's called.
Okay. So the one to the, it was to allow, if a natural channel seems to sort of form in that area, east of that little island, that we could potentially go there. And that would have the added benefit of being further from the eelgrass, which is all the way on the western side of that shoreline. So that's why we included that. You know, in the dredge zone, but we don't have the channel shown over there at all. It's still sort of along the western side of that Priscilla spur.
And forgive me too, as I've mostly skimmed this. It may not be a huge requirement for this notification, but there seems to be less discussion of the impacts to the water column by turbidity in the Priscilla Landing area from earlier discussions.
Yeah, so yeah, we can take a look at that, and I can try to add some more information on that. You know, we don't expect there to be any adverse impacts from water quality. We've got offsets to the eelgrass of 50 feet. There is that layer of finer grain material in many areas of Priscilla. But with that hydraulic dredging, that's hydraulic pipeline dredging, which is how that area is proposed to be dredged. That's the method that has the lowest sort of resuspension or lowest turbidity impacts. Basically just sort of fluidizes and sucks that material out of there, and it's gone down the pipeline. So, you know, we're not expecting any sort of adverse impacts to water quality or benthic organisms or eelgrass or shellfish in that area because of the method we're choosing to dredge.
Okay, great. And then I guess along those same lines, any proposed shellfish relay areas where you would have dredging taking place for collecting shellfish would be done in areas that have sandier sediments and less potential for siltation?
That's a good point. So we clearly need to think a little bit about this shellfish relay plan. Just that's a really good point. So you're concerned about doing relays in an area where it's sort of silty and then resuspending that material? Is that what you're worried about?
Right. You know, if there was an area where you were doing the dredging, that does create some turbidity.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there's shellfishing going on there now.
Yeah, channel dredging, but shellfish dredging.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's shellfish harvesting in that area now that doesn't necessarily cause adverse impacts. So I don't know that this would be a lot different than that, except for maybe it'd be a greater volume. But we'll take a look at it. That's a good point.
It sounds like it's more efficient than what the commercial harvesters do.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Good point. Okay. Then just to wrap up. So we had questions, a lot of questions about costs. So, you know, what was factored into the cost? I haven't enumerated those. I can go into that and provide more detail later. I didn't get that far with this presentation. So I think the costs that we provided in the ENF were very ballpark estimates. And I think as the project sort of gets fine-tuned and we really know exactly what we're doing, we're going to be able to come up with, a more refined costs.
I think this is Charlie, I think it would be a tall order to do more than you've done until we're farther along in the permitting process to understand what may be required and what we may want to do. The ballparking that you did was certainly instructive, but I don't think anybody expects that's the last word.
Yeah. Shana, do you have a question?
Yes, I had a lot of the questions related to the cost just because I wasn't sure where all those additional elements fell within that 3.1 million estimate that was provided back in the fall. So I guess I'm just wondering, with those elements, where along the timeline a revised cost estimate, and I know this doesn't necessarily have to do with the EENF, but in the process where a revised estimate might fall.
Yeah, okay, so we can work on that and get you more information on that. So that's definitely something that I'm sure this group is interested in. So we'll work on that. And I think there were just a number of general questions. I don't have those up on the screen right now, but they were things we can certainly address. And they were small things. So I guess one of my questions to this group is, what do you think the best way for us to address these comments and questions and get them back to this group is?
Leslie, if I could make a suggestion, I would support the idea of you preparing something in the nature of a supplement, if you will, addendum, whatever term you want to use, to respond to some of this. And that information, once reviewed by this group and assuming it's accepted, can eventually get integrated into the actual text of the ENF later on. But I hate to slow us down at this stage to prepare a whole revision of the ENF, which I know takes you a lot of time and effort, where you could provide a more condensed document that we can all review, as I use the term supplement, but you could use a different term.
Yep, I can't picture what that looks like, but I understand what you're talking about. So I can put together responses to questions, something like that. I might also sort of reference the area of the ENF where the answers would go, honestly.
Yeah, that's
so that you could see where we're going to add that bit of text or that addition or that revision or that new figure or whatever,
Right, exactly. And it's also true that we have these public forums coming up later in the month, and we should take the benefit of those as well before you actually do a revision of the ENF that is for filing. So I'd rather do one revision when we've got all the comments in hand.
Okay, so I think what I'll do then is work on adding comments, addressing comments we've talked about today and any others you guys want to get me in the next week, and try to turn that back around to everybody in this group before those public forums. And then, if we need to update it or add something to it after the public forums, we can. Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Well, I guess, Leslie, quick question. Is that something you can make public before the forums? Because I think people want to see.
Oh, yes. No, that would get posted before the public forums. Yeah, that would be another public document that would be, as I think, something like a supplement of providing more information for the public to have in hand before the forums are held.
Okay. Thank you. Shana, I think Shana had her hand up too, so I'm going to just pass the buck there.
Yeah, so just to kind of clarify, so there'll be a supplemental document that will sort of go through the questions that were in addition to the questions that you already received in writing, plus any additional that you received through June 7th or so. And that will be added to the EENF document, but you'll also sort of insert the answers to those questions at a later date in the document itself. Do I have that right?
You have it right, except for before we insert the answers to the questions or the additions to the EENF, I think we're going to circulate that to this group and to the public so everyone can see, you know, this bit of supplemental information.
Okay. Is
everybody happy with that? Okay.
Sounds good. Just a reminder, you said June 7th. That's next Monday.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will stop sharing here. Do share, pause share, stop share. There it is. Phew. Okay.
Well, this has been a very helpful session, and we've covered a lot of ground tonight. So I want to thank everybody for their comments. I have a question or two for Leslie that is, and maybe these questions are for the rest of the group as well. One is, Leslie, what do you project will be the pace of your work on the Mill Pond Channel study so that can be integrated into the other permitting activity and the ENF in particular? When do you expect the Mill Pond study will be wrapped up?
So we have to get out there and do sediment cores. And we are busy in the middle of that whole season right now, doing that in a number of locations. I expect to be able to get out there in June and do that work. And I do expect we'll need to do chemistry analysis at the lab because we do expect some fines in that material. That takes a little bit longer than the grain size analysis. So whether or not those results would be available to submit in the EENF, I don't know. But if not, we will certainly include them in the EIR.
Right. And I don't know the extent to which I don't remember the extent to which the Mill Pond Channel study includes the same sort of habitat studies that are embedded in what you did in the rest of the estuary and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's eelgrass, so we can't do that till say August. So that definitely won't go in the ENF. That's got to be included in the EIR. So I think those are the only two other things besides the bathymetry was sediment cores and eelgrass surveys.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie, just one quick one if I could. Again, echo your thanks to everybody who provided comments to date and during this meeting. Particularly like to thank Lauren, Sophia, Jeff, really glad to have you on with us at this stage. Your input is really, really helpful. Thank you.
Second that, very much so. There's also an open question, which I guess will get resolved offline. And I just wanted to flag it for everybody that we still need to kind of come to some resolution about how information on this project gets posted, shared, and whether there's a value in having some sort of a joint website, whether there are other mechanics. We've also got issues with the citizen forums and how we integrate the feed from Orleans into Eastham to make sure that people are all plugged in there. So there's going to be a little bit of mechanical dialogue I think we need to work through over the next few weeks. And I know Kevin's been thinking about that some, Jackie's given that some thought to that. And I just want to flag for the group that this is a set of issues, all tactical, that we just need to wade through and get resolved one way or another. The only other item on the agenda is scheduling of another meeting date, and it may be premature, or it may be that we want to schedule something following the public forums. I don't have a roadmap in my mind for this question, and I wanted to surface that to the group for input.
Do we have the dates of the public forums again?
22 and 29 of June at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, from my perspective, I would like to get feedback from this group on, this supplemental information before we incorporate it in the ENF and send it out. So I definitely need that from you guys.
Right. And so your information might be available in a week, and we could conceivably schedule an NESG meeting for something around, I don't know my calendar, the 15th or something like that. Is that what you're imagining?
Well, if the comments are due, I'm asking you guys to give me comments by the 7th. So I'm not going to have everything ready for you until like the week of the 14th.
Right.
If you want to have a meeting before that public forum, we can, or we can wait until after. If you want it before the public forum, I'm going to say it's the latter part of the week of the 14th.
Right.
I would be comfortable meeting after the forum so that we have all the information together.
I tend to agree with you, Jamie. I think we'll have one opportunity to bring it all together, and we'll have the supplement information, we'll have the public forum input. It'll all be useful.
I just wanted to, Shana, are you in agreement on that? Because I know that sometimes your questions are a little more poignant than what I'm able to produce. So I'm just curious in your input there too.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if, maybe the PowerPoint is posted online before the public meeting. But otherwise I am okay with meeting after the public meeting.
Just to be clear, so Leslie's supplement, I'm calling it, I think is intended to be posted before those public meetings occur. And that will, I think to a large extent, deal with all those answers to questions that we've just gone through tonight, so that there will be a draft supplement, if you will, that's out there posted for people to react to, but when the public forums occur.
Shana, are you also suggesting a PowerPoint that I would be giving at those public forums?
No, it was just, I wasn't aware that the supplement, we would have that before the public meeting to post. So I thought in lieu of posting a draft supplemental information on the website, that we could post the PowerPoint. So that's what I meant.
Okay.
Well, maybe that's a fallback if we've run into a jam somewhere along the way. But I think it would be great if we can create the supplement in time for it to be posted and circulated.
Yeah, I think we can do it. Harry, do you have a question?
I have a quick question for Charlie, and don't worry, I'm not going to attack you, Charlie. This involves these forums that are going to be held at the Orleans Town Hall. Are these for Orleans residents only, or are they open? Is this open for Eastham residents as well?
Exactly. So the plan that we're going to put in motion absent any rejection by this group, is that there will be two forums, one on the 22nd and one on the 29th. The one on the 22nd is intended to be a general public forum, whereas the one on the 29th is intended to really focus on the dewatering area because of the specific impacts to the residents in the area near that dewatering area. And since we expect an extensive dialogue on the dewatering area, we felt it was useful to have a separate forum for that. So the one on the 22nd is really the main one, if you will, for most people. And the intention is that it's open to Orleans and Eastham residents. It will be live streamed to both towns through Channel 18. And we need to work out the logistics of all that. People who come to the forum will have some mechanism of, it will be an in-person forum, I should have alerted you. And we'll have a mechanism for people to come to a microphone, be recognized and questions answered and all the rest of that. So I have worked on a draft article for the newspaper and shared that with Jackie and John Kelly and Nate Sears and maybe one or two other people. It's very mechanical. It's just an announcement here. There will be these meetings on the 22nd and 29th. Here's how it works. And the hope is that at least a couple of the local papers, the Chronicle and the Cape Codder, will will include that article in there. Further, my intention is to put some sort of a notice into the local papers very shortly to alert people who aren't aware that the EENF has been posted and that they can go look at it. I expect there are some people who are not aware that it has been posted and it has not actually yet been posted in Orleans. So we need to get that done. But in any event, so I'm trying to create a set of mechanics to make this known, the events known, and to encourage people to attend.
Yeah, and make sure you alert the Independent. They're here tonight too, but that's also, one of the other newspaper outlets that I think is getting maybe a little forgotten in the process. So I think it's important for them to know as well.
Happy to do it.
Great, thanks. And so both towns, right? Is that the short answer then?
Yes, but the second will be really focused on the dewatering area, which I think is going to be primarily of interest to the Orleans residents who live in that greater neighborhood.
Thank you.
Sure.
And follow-up question, Charlie, just so that I understand, these forums are really not to get into a back and forth debate. Instead, it's to gather public input. People stand up, speak their piece, and sit down. Or do you expect to have the Estuary study group as a panel up at the front in a position to respond to some of the questions?
Yeah, actually what I'm anticipating to make it efficient is to have Leslie be available to be responding to the questions that are coming up, since she is sort of in the middle of all this. Mm-hmm. And that it wouldn't be a Nauset Estuary stakeholder group meeting where we're a panel or anything else, but it's rather an opportunity for people to serve up questions, comments. She's making notes, but she's also responding to those comments as they come up if they need a response.
Thank you.
But I also envision, like, I'm going to make a presentation just about the major components of the project and then take questions. Is that what you're imagining?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But I'm hoping that is short, because the real purpose is to get the comments and questions. Yeah. And we're probably only going to have 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. So we've got to keep the presentation part really short.
Okay, I'll be concise.
Yeah, I just think we'll get bogged down if it becomes I mean, we really want people to look at the EENF, and if they're too lazy to do so, then shame on them at the end of the day.
It's daunting.
It is, but it's really not. If particularly if you start by focusing on the summary at the beginning, it gets you pretty well oriented without a ton of effort. So those are the mechanics, Harry, that I'm imagining. If there's somebody has a violent reaction to that idea, certainly open to it. But the idea was to go in that direction.
Okay. Well, I think the only thing that I would offer up, as you can tell, I have an opposing view, and that I might request the opportunity to present a minority opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Maybe you and I can talk about that offline here rather than hold everybody up. That may be challenging in the context of this event.
Another hand up.
Oh, sorry, Shana.
So maybe it's just me, but so this meeting is in person only. So if somebody wants to participate, they have to go to the meeting and get up and speak. If they want to give comments.
Could we just jump right to Sarah, who's in the background? I think she's working on logistics to allow remote.
It's set. We can do it from the Nauset room. I got it figured out today.
Thank you for asking that, Shane. I was worried about that too.
It's called a hybrid.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Asked and answered.
I do think that we should provide an opportunity for people to submit questions and comments via like email or something like that, because some people either not going to be able to attend or not have time to speak or whatever. So I do think we need to offer some time and a venue for them to submit comments and questions.
Where would that go to? Where would you suggest that the questions be submitted to prior?
I'd suggest they be submitted to like the NESG, and then I guess I could be copied, or just NESG, and then you could send them to me either way.
Okay, so that would be included in our announcement, maybe, that we are accepting questions prior to be read at the meeting.
Could do that too. That's a good idea.
I think that should be included in the announcement.
I mean, I've been in a couple of these meetings before, and so, I'll have to have somebody else from Woods Hole Group helping me man that chat. And sort of feeding those questions to me, because I can't read them and think and answer the questions all at once. I'll miss something. So I'll have to have somebody from Woods Hole Group helping me out with that. I've got someone who can do that. So, but to the extent you guys are watching and you have other comments, feel free to chime in at the same time too, if we've missed something.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of including that in the announcement. So, we should have the, the remote link and the ability to submit questions if you can't attend.
Charlie, one other thing, if I could jump in, please.
Please.
And it's also, Jamie, since you and I are the signatories to this second memorandum of understanding, I just scanned it again, and I'd like to see that we address this now, where we have a Nauset Estuary stakeholder group member who has indicated he wishes to actually stand up at this public meeting and oppose it. Would you be on board with me suggesting, and we've done this in our various select board meetings, when a committee member, on a small committee might take an opposing view of the committee, could we just ask that if he chooses to do that, he identify himself just as a citizen and not as part of the Nauset Estuary stakeholder group? Because I do feel that if he's standing up firmly in opposition, that does not comport to what we've agreed.
I guess I would probably, number one, find out the legality around it. And number two, if it's within legal bounds, I would allow that member to do as they chose fit. And That would be my first thought if there's nothing illegal about that process. I guess that's my initial opinion right there. You know, I think everyone is free to their opinion. If he gets up and speaks, I don't think he should speak as a representative of the group. Just like when I give my personal opinion, I don't speak as a representative of the select board. I speak as a, you know, but I am a member of, and you can never take that person away from being a member of. I guess, Harry, do you understand where we're going with that?
Well, I do. And I think that I've been pretty clear about my opposition to this project from the beginning.
Yep.
And so I don't think that I'm going against anything that I've said from the start. And so I think I'm being rather consistent, and that you know, I think that to separate Harry Swift as the member of the stakeholder group and Harry Swift as the citizen of Eastham would be very difficult to do. I understand what you're saying, Kevin, but it's the same thing. You know,
you don't feel anything in the MOU applies to you as a NESG member?
I oppose signing it.
Okay, thank you.
I voted not in favor of signing it. And was an advocate of not signing it.
And I guess, in my opinion, that's why we have a group, so that we can have a variety of opinions. And it's not in my nature to prevent someone from voicing their opinion if it's within legal bounds.
So maybe we'll table that for right now and explore it further. Okay. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time. We've been at this for almost 2.5 hours. I welcome a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Charlie.